Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this eighth and final session of the series Law in the COVID-19, co-sponsored by Univali and Widener University, Delaware Law School. It is with a mixture of feelings that I open this session. On one hand, I'm very sad for finishing this project. But on the other hand, I'm very glad for the results we have achieved with this idea that started in late April in a Zoom session in which James May, Erin Daly, Gilson Jacobson, Natami, and I took part, and Orlando as well. To these colleagues, my most special thanks for making this possible, as well as to Dean Eileen Greena for building bridges with some of the speakers, and to Ana Luisa Cousani for the very much important technological support. As I was saying, we had wonderful results of this project. We discussed deep aspects of the pandemic and its reflects in different areas of law. It all happened during the pandemic. That is, everything was new to all of us. We had a unique opportunity for having great specialists talking about each issue and thinking and making us and our high-level audience think and reflect. We had more than 1,000 accesses in our webinars. I would also like to thank all the professors from both institutions and from both countries that have participated in this series, most of which are present this evening. So I will nominate when I present each one. And I'm happy to say that maybe this series is not finishing today. Let's say we are taking a break. A summer break at Widener, a winter break at Univali. But I'm quite sure we might come back in the near future and maybe transform this series in a permanent event, sponsored by our institutions, which are closer to each other as time passes by. Now let's start. And for that, I'd like to invite Professor Rodney Smola, the esteemed Dean of Delaware Law School, for opening this session entirely devoted to the perspectives of law after the COVID-19. Rod, thanks very much for being with us. Thanks to Anna. It's very nice to see you both. And your prestigious presence is very important for us. Thanks a lot. So you have the word.
Well, Marcelo, thank you very much. You've said everything I wanted to say. I'm wearing my Brazil football jersey in honor of our friendship and partnership tonight. I agree, this should be a pause for your winter and our summer, and let's continue to have these dialogues. I had a list of folks that I wanted to congratulate and thanks, but you've already named them all. All of our colleagues that are on the program tonight, whether you participated as a planner or a leader or as a participant in one way or another, congratulations. I was thinking about the friendship and the partnership that we have between Univali and the Delaware Law School. We started our dual LLM degree in 2017, and then we went to a dual JD degree in 2018. We've had the wonderful experience of the Legal Scholars Program, in which we've had judges and lawyers and administrators and law students from Santa Catarina in Brazil and Univali visiting us. Many of us have had the wonderful a delightful opportunity to visit you. Anna and I still think about the week we spent with you with great fondness, and how much we love seeing everyone and the beauty of that part of the world. And I'll just lastly share this reflection. We may be hemispheres apart, but we're not apart at all in our values and our friendship, and we're not apart at all in our thoughts about what it means to be a lawyer or a judge or a law professor in these times. We have two constitutional democracies that are struggling, and we are all collectively on this program committed to the rule of law, committed to the protection of human dignity, committed to basic human rights. And that's the bond we share. And thousands of miles can't separate us, and a virus can't separate us from that commitment. I feel, and I know Anna sitting next to me feel, deep love and affection for all of you. And I'm so proud of everyone at both universities for bringing us together in this intellectual effort, but also for bringing us together in this effort that connects our values and our beliefs. So congratulations, everyone. We have a new pandemic puppy at the end of the program. We'll show her off to you. But we're going to mute our microphone because she'll start barking in a few minutes. So take care, and I'm looking forward to hearing everyone else's reflections tonight.
Thanks very much, Rod, for your nice words and real words. And well, there is this reciprocity, and we are very grateful for the partnership, but especially for the friendship we all developed. So thanks very much. Well, it's a great pleasure for us to have so many professors from Univalle and Widener University, Delaware Law School. It's the first time, well, never we had so many people joined in a meeting from the university. So it's a unique moment. And unfortunately, we're not together, but we are together anyway. So I'd like to start. We have this evening. We don't have well a formal any formality at all. So I'm gonna ask if Professor Sean Lugg could start with his reflections, and then we keep going, and maybe we could ask for an American professor and then a Brazilian professor, and go on. Sean, is that okay for you?
That is fine, and I've broken every rule that you have by sitting here in a white shirt and a tie in an informal session, so I apologize for that.
Not at all.
I wish I had. I don't have a football jersey like the Dean, so that'll be my next Amazon purchase, which is what I did not get a pandemic pet, but I'm sure my Amazon bill has risen dramatically through the past several days. But thank you. I've really appreciated the opportunity to participate in this group. And I've met through the years, as you know, many people affiliated with your program, and have had a real great opportunity this summer to work directly with students from Univalle in the technology and the law course that we've offered, which really has given me an opportunity to you kind of come up with some reflections on what we've dealt with and where we're going in the future. And I think, to Dean Small's point, the similarities far exceed the differences in our structures and our approaches to the practice of law. And that, I think, is profound. And from that, as we work forward, I think we as countries are both realizing that we are entering and will enter in, hopefully very soon, a new normal that will not be the normal of February 2020. And a lot of the work and the discussions that we've had over the past several weeks gives, maybe sheds some light on where we're going. But I think that, you know, in any situation that presents challenges, much like the pandemic has, you truly see the good in people, and you see the ideas that really percolate And some of the things that we are doing now in Delaware, and I'm going to shift to, the actual operations of our courts, are things that I don't think anybody would have imagined even 3, 4, or 5 months ago. And one of the things that really stuck out to me as our courts began their reopening process was embedded in their presentation was a comment that we need to be more receptive to using technology as we work into the future, which in worlds that we operate in the practice of law that is kind of grounded in these staid precedents and textbooks and unwillingness to change at times, to hear that the courts are now recognizing that. And what I've learned is we are, I think, a bit behind what you've done in Brazil with respect to technology, and we're going to learn a lot from what you are experiencing with artificial intelligence and how we can incorporate that. So my reflections of the pandemic are that from a horrible set of circumstances, we've been able to kind of buckle down, look at things holistically, and maybe come up with some ideas that will enable us to generate an even better practice going forward. And I've really, the thing that I've appreciated the most personally is the opportunity to see what other countries like Brazil are doing, and to hopefully borrow some ideas to really effectively advance our practice. So for that, I say thank you for inviting me to participate. And I hope that some of those aspirational thoughts do carry forward. One, that we can get a handle on these issues, the pandemic itself, but that two, we can really take advantage of some of the things that we've learned to do that we never thought we'd be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. It's very nice to hear from you. Well, our students are delighted with your classes, and I'm very glad they're there. They're having this possibility despite the pandemic. So this was something I believe very good that we did, and that was the efforts of Eileen and her staff to provide the possibility of the students to take classes online. So in this situation, we had these students not missing the opportunity to take their dual degree this year. So that's been great.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to invite Professor Natami Bonisoni for her remarks. Thanks, Natami, for being with us again. And please feel free to talk.
Thank you. My pleasure. Hello, everyone. I'm seeing very good colleagues and good friends from Monivale that I haven't seen for a couple months, and from Delaware Law that always received us very well. And I enjoy the opportunity to thank you all in the name of Venice Mola, which is a pleasure to see here, that opened her house not only to us, but also to all of our students. So it is a pleasure to see you, and in your name, I'd like to say hello to all of our Delaware friends. So, as we talked in our first meeting, in Brazil, we are seeing a huge number, unfortunately, of violations of human rights, as we have never seen before. Since our first constitution enacted on 1824, we never faced so many reports of violations as the last couple days and couple months. And we know that we live in an unusual time that requires that the decisions must be taken carefully. However, from the constitutional perspective, we are not in an exception period in Brazil. Today, we are facing a public calamity, but not an exceptionality that allows the violations that are being committed by our three branches. And something that I could realize, at least here in Brazil, and it's making me to think a lot about it, is how the people is not aware of their rights and liberties, and also they're not aware about the limits of the action of the state. And how we could see that by the way that Brazilian people is easily submitting to unconstitutional decisions based on fear with no legal foundations. So from this brief consideration, I guess I can share two different perspectives from now on. The first one is that I'm really concerned. I am really afraid of what we are going to find out, what we are going to discover after the pandemic. What are the human violations that are human rights violations that we are facing in Brazil that we are going to discover after the pandemic? And the other one is an expectation and also a hope that as Brazilian, we may live this period strengthened as a people and aware of the importance that we have for the maintenance of our republic. So, in one hand, is really a concern that I have. On the other hand, is really a hope that I care that we Brazilian people can have on the importance that we have on the maintenance of our republic. So that's it.
Thanks very much, Professor Natami, our dear former student and now our colleague, and for your words. And so let's keep going. And in this same issue, I'd like to invite my dear colleague and friend, Professor Erin Daly, for her remarks. Thanks, Erin.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here and so thrilled to have been a part of this. And whenever we do anything with Marcelo, we always start by saying that this is really built on friendship. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about this is that it is built on that friendship, and it makes doing everything sort of simple, right? It's not that it's easy, but it does make it simple. So this really started with a text that Marcelo sent me and Jimmy and Natami and said, how about doing this? And then poof, it happens because it was a very important idea. And we were able to just get these wonderful people to sort of bring their expertise on it. So it's just a great experience, and I'm looking forward to sort of how it evolves in the future. And I just want to pick up quickly on some of the things that other people have already said. I think Rod said it very well, just to say that we are all, we're separated in certain ways, and certainly the pandemic has made us more separate. We're all sort of, stuck in our own little homes, far away from other people and without regular contact to our colleagues. And yet at the same time, it's bringing us together, and it's making conversations possible that weren't happening before. And that really is based, as he said, on common values about rule of law, about human rights, about democracy, and this whole sort of interconnected web of values. And I think what we're going through right now is so complex, and this webinar series sort of grew as it went along. We didn't start out mapping out the issues, but it sort of grew as we realized that there's more and more different kinds of issues that need to be understood and need to be addressed. So we start off with human rights and environmental law and health law and some sort of the obvious candidates, if you will, but then also recognizing that corporate law is affected in ways that are really hard for us to imagine if we're not experts in it, and other freedoms, constitutional rights, freedom of speech, corruption issues about governance, and issues about the role of the judiciaries. All of these are sort of interconnected. We see this also in the protests that are going on right now in America, because as you know, we've got two different crises going on, at least, if not more so. We're certainly dealing with the pandemic and the fact that we don't seem to be out of the first wave while we're going into the second wave already. We also have this massive protest movement that started sort of spontaneously because we all, and I'm sure many of you in Brazil and people around the world have seen this horrific video of the absolute definition of indignity, right? The point of human dignity is to be treated as a person, and the sort of the most fundamental rule would be that you never end up with somebody's knee on your neck fighting for your life and losing. And that's connected, but that the protest movement that started up from that was broader than that, right? It was about police brutality, but it's also about non-discrimination in the context of criminal justice, but also non-discrimination in the broader sense also. And we're seeing with the pandemic how our structural problems have really exacerbated the experience for many people and led to greater and more numerous and also more diverse different types of human rights violations, whether in terms of healthcare, inequalities, employment, family protection, environment, etc. So I just want to sort of commend everybody who was involved in this series for bringing their expertise to bear so that it allows us to really get a much more comprehensive sense of the complexity of the issues that we're facing now. And I just want to close, unfortunately, by echoing everything that Tommy said, because of course, and Dean Smola alluded to this also, but of course we are also facing crises of governance, voting rights issues, franchise issues, and fundamental crises of democracy in of our countries in some similar ways and in some different ways. So I think we need to remain vigilant as we pay attention to the pandemic, but also remain vigilant to the protection of our rights as we move forward. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Erin, especially for your nice words. I think this is it, really, and things are going on like that since we started. And when we remember that everything started after a glass or two of wine in a Saturday evening in Florianopolis, then suddenly we started to think how we could be, closer and many institutions be closer. And then you emailed Eileen that evening and she answered immediately. And so everything started by then. It's very good. Thanks very, very much. Well, next I'd like to invite Judge Adamastor Turnes for his remarks. Thanks, Judge, for being with us. It's a great pleasure to have you again here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very honored to be here. I would like to thank Professor Marcelo Busalho and to thank Dean of the Widener University. And I will just try to address two aspects of a perspective of good things as the outcome of the situation of the pandemic. Well, in Brazil, even as we speak, the Senate is turning into a bill, an old initiative which will establish the new regulatory framework of sanitation in Brazil. It's a critical matter, especially when it comes to public health, and to prevention of many diseases. Those kind of diseases we unfortunately still have in Brazil, and which origins are deeply attached to this lack of sanitation This is a big problem in Brazil nowadays. But today, I mean, tonight, the Senate is turning into a new law this very important project, this initiative, and it will allow cities and counties and townships to unite in order to bring some private interest in terms of developing sewage systems and everything which is needed when it comes to sanitation. The other thing that I'm going to be optimistic or maybe naive in a sense is that we have now a new project from the government, central government, I mean the federal government, which is to turn our social welfare income, minimum income program into something which will not be just a pandemic measure. This is still an idea, but it's already something that I rate as something very good, that we in our society, with this big problem of inequality that we have and some other problems, just like lack of sanitation, lack of education, and qualification for jobs, we will have a permanent program of minimal income for everybody who needs it, not only informal workers, but also people in need in general. The third aspect I would like to talk is something about a recognition, something about recognizing that the universal health system of Brazil, which was frameworked after the NHS in Great Britain, United Kingdom, has shown its extreme utility and extreme importance to our society. The Brazilian society is recognizing nowadays more than ever the very importance of having a national health service which is free for everyone who needs. And last, I would like to say that one aspect of our debate in late April, I believe, is still open. I'm talking about a topic of my presentation, which was testing the great gap. Unfortunately, we see that testing, when it comes to coronavirus pandemic, to the coronavirus pandemic control or fight against it, is still there is still this gap. I mean, in Brazil, at least, I believe in the US, testing is far ahead from us, but we have received some strange news about reducing testing. I don't know if it is true, because we unfortunately nowadays have international leaders whose words have a little level of credibility. And to bring it to the end, I would say that I hope that the international community reaches another level of cooperation through some changes in the structure of the United Nations and its agencies just like the World Health Organization, to keep it alive. I mean, it's very important that we have international cooperation. This webinar itself, it's a little example of international cooperation. Everybody here is acquiring new data, new information through this act of cooperation. I would like to say that I'm sure that it was a good wine that evening. Thank you very much.
It surely was. Thank you. Thanks very much, Judge Stearns, and for your words, for your participation. I know that you are a former LLM student from Univalley, and we're very proud of having students of your level as our former LLM students. So thank you. Well, I have the privilege to invite my dear friend James May to talk a little about the perspectives of implementing COVID-19. Jimmy, thanks very much for everything, for making this possible. You're very much responsible for this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Marcelo, and good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. And I have the usual thanks as well to Natami and Jilson, and of course, Aaron and Dean Smola for authorizing this and just for making it happen. And also, of course, to you, Marcelo, because it wouldn't have happened without you. We've come a long way since our bus ride to a Utah Jazz game more than a decade ago. So I agree with everything that I've heard, and it's just been a fascinating webinar series, and it's been just great to be a part of it. Also because it's put me back in touch with many of the students that I've met from Univalley, and my friends there, and who have visited us at Delaware Law School as visiting scholars, and also during my visits there. So it's just been such a treat. Thank you all the way around. So I just have a few things, a few points to make. A few observations, and the first one is just how much, if you will, in many ways we're worse off than we were 10 weeks ago when we had that initial call to talk about this webinar series. So in that period of time, the U.S. and Brazil have become world leaders, not in controlling or addressing the pandemic, but in leading the way in cases and deaths. So the latest numbers, more or less, are that in the United States, there are about 2.3 million people who have been diagnosed. The number is probably far higher. Of course, no one knows. And there are about 120,000 deaths attributed to COVID-19. And that's more people who have died due to COVID-19 than died in the Great War that my grandfather fought in as a doughboy in Alsace-Lorraine in France in World War I. So it's been quite deadly. And Brazil is just right behind the United States, with at least the latest numbers show that the number afflicted is north of 1 million, about 1.2 million or so, and that about 54,000 people have died. And there are some projections that I was reading out of the World Health Organization that Brazil could eclipse the United States in cases and in deaths by July. So, so it's a huge problem. Of course, it's a huge challenge. And the purpose of this series was to talk about the role of law in the time of COVID-19. And I just want to make mention of also of our other colleague who participated, John Colhane, who gave just a fantastic talk about all the human health dimensions that are associated with the pandemic and the role of the rule of law in addressing them. And it's just that there are all these challenges, and there are positive roles for law to play, as Natami mentioned and Aaron mentioned, with human rights, as Dean Smola has mentioned concerning protection of rights of free speech, as others have talked about with access to justice and the court systems, and so on. But also about the topic that Marcelo and I spoke about, which is the environment. So let me say a thing or two about that. So, and that is this: there's no good news here either. I wish there were. Maybe there is in Brazil. But since Marcelo and I gave our talk almost 2 months ago, the degree of intransigence, that's difficulty in enforcing the nation's environmental laws, has just increased. Meaning that there's less enforcement than there was 2 months ago. The Trump administration has stopped conducting inspections. It's cut off Occupational Safety and Health Act protections for workers. It's provided liability protection for factories and petrochemical refineries, even when they didn't ask for it. In the words of some, to provide a free pass to polluters over the last 2 months. So it's been used to exploit gaps in law and also to just ignore them on the environmental front. So that's sort of, that's sort of the continuing bad news there. And then the third point to make is just about the relationship between the topics that many of us have talked about, including the environment, and what's happening in the United States and all across the world about social justice, and in the United States with the Black Lives Matter movement. So there's a connection, there's a direct connection here. So the movement is directly connected, the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, for example, is directly connected, for example, to climate change, that there's a direct line between white supremacy and US policies that have changed the climate. For polluters, for factories, for providing, again, liability protection, and not providing for causes of action under the US Constitution, under statutory law, or under regulatory law to redress climate change. So the one example is it's very difficult to bring a cause of action to challenge climate policy in the United States. That is to demonstrate standing, to show you're among those who are hurt, because the US courts requires a very rigid system of injury in fact and redressability and traceability. And now that third component on causation, most courts have said that litigants can't show that that carbon majors, big factories and polluters are responsible. And who does that hurt? Well, that hurts people on the lowest rung of the economic ladder in the United States most. It hurts people living in communities of color. It hurts the dispossessed. It hurts those, as we heard from Aaron and Tommy, who have been denied voting rights, and so on. So this is the beginning of a worldwide conversation about the role of white supremacy and colonialism, perhaps in Brazil as well, and climate change, and incumbent responsibilities to protect, as the Dean mentioned at the outset, it was great to hear, protect human dignity in the face of these challenges, and the role of the law in doing that. So those are the points that I wanted to make, but let me just close by saying, again, this has just been fantastic. I've really enjoyed these sessions. I've learned a lot. Thanks everyone so much again for participating.
Thanks very much, Jimmy. Indeed, yeah, you are right. Actually, it has started before that wine. It has started in a bus in Salt Lake City a decade ago, where I had the privilege to meet you after a lecture, your lecture I was attending, and then by hazard we met in the bus, and it was great, and we started this wonderful friendship that lasts up to now. Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
Well, let's keep going. Then I'd like to invite my colleague, my friend, my partner in this project, Professor Gilson Jacobson. Gilson, thanks for being with us. Thank you for your help. And we had Judge Morrow with us, thanks to you. I have to remark that. So thanks a lot, and you have the word.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Marcelo. Good evening, everyone. I would like to dedicate a part of my time, a part of my brief speech to congratulate Professor Marcelo Dantas for this academic and binational endeavor that is ending today and which brought to the debate such important issues related to law and COVID-19. I was an eyewitness to the effort and dedication he undertook to make the exciting webinars we had every Wednesday evening in the last 2 months a reality. For this, also I thank so much and congratulate Dean Rodsmola and each professor and each external guest who has been here with us in the past few weeks. Well, I think it is a very difficult task to try to draw any safe projections about what awaits us in the post-pandemic future. But I will try it. I accept the challenge also. I am an optimist. Nevertheless, I believe that the post-COVID-19 world will be more xenophobic and even more difficult world for migrants of all kinds, unfortunately. It is likely to further increase the abyssal gap that separates wealthy people from poor people. By this, I mean that economic and social inequality tends to worsen, which is not good for a planet that wants to be more just and sustainable. We will see many young people who are being taken out of school today, not returning to school tomorrow, becoming easy prey for organized crime, especially in third world, in countries third world like Brazil. On the other hand, the time of social isolation has shown us that the natural environment can still regenerate if we make a concentrated effort to end polluting emissions of all kinds. It showed that new technologies will not necessarily supplant the personal contact of our relationship life, because who is not longing to go to a theater play, to a cinema, to a sports stadium, or even to attend a beautiful classroom? Anyway, I think we will have to have eyes and actions aimed to the most depraved and fragile people. Eyes and actions focused on nature or environment, but also eyes and actions for those we love, who are our family, our friends, and students, so that no one is left behind. Thank you so much for attention, Professor Marcelo.
Thank you, Professor Gilson, for your words, for your thoughts. It was very nice to hear your remarks. Thanks a lot. So next, I have the privilege to invite Professor Ola Tucker, who was here with us talking about money laundering and corruption, and her thoughts about the perspectives of law after the COVID-19. Thanks, Ola, for joining us again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me back. It's a pleasure to speak with this distinguished group, as well as very exciting to speak on these topics and shed light and spread awareness to these very important issues. Transparency, open dialogue, and truthful information are so important, particularly now more than ever. Speaking out about abuses, fraud, and corruption is so important at this time and has become even more so during this time, the pandemic, the protests. In particular, money laundering and corruption risks have been increasing. Money laundering and corruption, by their nature, have a global scope and reach. They operate cross-jurisdictionally and without regard to borders. Much of the impact of this pandemic applies across countries. That being said, there's also a disproportionate impact on developing countries, which are particularly susceptible to the risks opened up by the pandemic and will continue to feel these impacts for a long time to come. In particular, concerns have been raised about the impact of corruption on international pandemic relief. Poor countries especially struggle to cope with this pandemic. The rising corruption risks stem from the economic measures governments have taken to help national economies in response to this pandemic. As a general matter, corruption risks are heightened when businesses depend on government policy to return profits, government institutions are weakened, and affairs are unstable due to this transition. The pandemic contributes to this instability and uncertainty across the world. So the focus as it relates to corruption and bribery risks needs to be on relief funds and the debt relief. We need safeguards, scrutiny, due diligence, and record-keeping requirements around these issues. So that being said, and in order not to conclude on a completely dire note, this pandemic and what we're seeing right now across the world really does open up new opportunities to raise awareness to these issues, as we're talking about now during this webinar series. And that's one of the most important things that we can do, is talk honestly and openly, bring awareness and speak truthfully about what we're seeing and how everybody can get involved and help during this time.
Thanks very much, Professor Ola. It's very true. Fortunately, we're facing many problems in Brazil concerning corruption during the pandemic. And it's very sad on one hand. On the other hand, we see that the institutions are working, people are being arrested, operations are in course. So unfortunately, we have people that are able to do that, but on the other hand, at least things are working and our institutions are quite strong. Thanks a lot for your presence and be welcome every time at Univale.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite my colleague, my friend, Professor Osvaldo Agrippino from Univale for his remarks. Thanks, Osvaldo, for being with us again.
Good evening, all. Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank the Professor Marcelo Buzago Glantas for this kindly and efficient coordination of this seminar and webinars series about COVID in cooperation with Delaware University and my student Lu Kozani for all her support on this webinars. So I'd like to talk about a little bit about the change that on my perception we see during this pandemic period, calling the attention for the whole of the state and the international cooperation. I think we need to redefine and we need to debate the whole of the state that we have, even US and United States and Brazil and everywhere. And I think that the unique solution we have to deal with this kind of the problem like pandemic is the soft power, not hard power. And the soft power is that we are doing now. We are changing ideas with the academia and the diplomacy, the history on the last century and even in this century of the political events show that we need to change the way that we have to solve the problem. So soft power, it's a very interesting approach, and I'd like to remember of Brazilian Federal Constitution. In the Article 4, we have the privilege for having a special article on our Federal Constitution, Article 4, that mentions the deals about the international relations that we have to pursue on the relation of Federative Republic of Brazil with other states and international organizations. Article 4 mentioned that we need to be governed by the following principles in international relations: national independence, prevalence of human rights, self-determination of the peoples, non-intervention, equality among the states, defense of peace, peaceful settlement of conflicts, and repudiation of terrorism and racism, cooperation among peoples for the progress of mankind, and granting of political asylum. So we have at least 10 principles in our federal constitution that are very helpful in this moment that we are now facing in this moment. So I just about that, the whole of, for example, of the cooperation that we are dealing with, that we are doing now with, for example, with another universities everywhere in the globe, like the Perugia, Minho, Delaware, and Colombia, and Portugal. So I think that it's very interesting because at the same time that we are changing ideas and knowing new people, new habits, new cultures, I think that we can have a different approach to solve our problem, because the international organizations that we have built in since the end of the Second World War, like United Nations, I think that we need to discuss to redefine the roles of this international organization. For example, World Health Organization, Organização Mundial de Saúde. And so that's what I would like to talk a little bit and to call the attention for the importance of the international relations, which is different from foreign relations. International relation is broader than, for example, the relations among the states. So that's why I that we like as lawyers and judges and professors, law professors, we need to talk about that in this moment of cooperation. That's my small intervention. I would like to talk for everyone to be here. It's a privilege. It's an honor to cooperate with friends of U.S. and Brazil. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, Osvaldo. It's our honor to have you in this group, and you are always with us. You are always ready to help. So thanks very much, my friend, for your cooperation with this program. Well, let's keep going. I'd like to invite Professor Laura Jacobs for her remarks. Laura, thank you very much again. You were here last week. You're back. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Marcelo, and thank you, Marcelo, for the opportunity, and to Eileen as well for the opportunity, to Natami for all of her help, and also to Anna for being my partner for the privacy presentation. It was a joy working with her. I did want to say I did not get a pandemic pup or a pandemic puppy, but I do have a pre-pandemic pup whom I'm sure is right here and would love to join any dog collaboration at the end of the session. Also, I do actually have a Brazil football jersey because I'm a huge fan, and next time if we do this again, I will definitely wear it. So count me in for the team. I wanted to just quickly echo again that it's been such a wonderful opportunity. It's very special during this challenging time to connect with everyone and really find out how many commonalities we all have. I feel kind of isolated because I think I'm the only person sitting so far west in California, and it has been a very tough week in terms of both the death rate going up, spikes, and the virus, hospitalizations, and the protests. So it's kind of a crazy time, and this has been a really joyful part of the last couple of weeks for me, so I appreciate that. I do feel like we're fast friends now. I'm teaching a digital law class for the first time this summer, although I have worked with Widener in the past, and I have a lot of students from Univali who have great breadth and depth in their knowledge. They have a lot of curiosity. It is a real joy to have them in class collaborating together with the whole team. And I have very high hopes, referring back to some earlier comments, that these programs together will produce some very well-respected world leaders, which I know we need right now. Again, Anna and I focused on privacy. Our theme, if you can have a theme, was really questions. We realized that we have a lot of questions right now about the different types of technologies being created to deal with contact tracing and other technologies in response to COVID. Questions about when and how the information that is being taken now off of our phones, for instance, will actually be capped, or whether it will be kept by governments for future use for the possibility of future outbreaks or other issues. How we can stop the privacy breaches and hacking that we're seeing right now, and how we really and when we stand up and voice our concerns to our respective governments. We see a lot of people standing up right now, and I think this is another thing that we really need to start voicing concerns about how much of our personal data is out there and how it may actually be used at some point without our knowledge and certainly without our consent. So again, I appreciate the standing in solidarity with all of you, and we'll get through this time together, and I look forward, I hope, hopefully, to meeting all of you in person sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We all hope that, and thanks for your words concerning our students. It's very interesting because what has happened so far is that the students are having a great time, a great opportunity. They're very glad. And what I usually hear from you, faculty members, are good news from the students. It seems that our students are doing a good job when they are there. So we are at least we are sure that we are in the right path. So it makes me feel very much happy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to invite my colleague, Luciene Dauhi, for your presentation. Sorry, Luciene, for leaving you to the end, but the last will be the first, so you have the word here.
Thank you, Professor Dantas. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with all of you again. In my speech, I remarked about some aspects of Brazilian constitutional law during the COVID health emergency with an approach to fundamental rights and free speech. And I could debate it with Professor Smola, and it was really great. And I explained that at different moments, federal, state, and local governments declared a public health emergency and declare public calamity, and Brazilian Parliament approved the COVID health emergency law. And I explained too that the federal constitution and the COVID law provided the common action of federal, state, and local government for health protection, characterizing Brazilian federalism as cooperative, and health is a fundamental right in Brazil. Our federal constitution recognizes the health care access to everyone, national or foreigner, and protecting health care, the normative activity of states and municipalities occurred in an uncoordinated manner and often without observance of the federal constitution and the parameters of the COVID law, restricting fundamental rights and promoting the interruption of public service with losses for the populations directly affected. In Brazil, 23 states declared quarantine in all their territory, although quarantine is a measure to suspects of infection. And faced with this scenario, the federal government appealed to governors and mayors to review their normative acts and edited provisional measures to safeguard at the federal level the definition of essential public activities and service. And the Supreme Federal Court was questioned on the subject and stated that the competence of union must always be interpreted in a way that safeguards the legislative and the administrative autonomy of the other federated entities in order to face the health emergency of the new coronavirus. State and local decrees restricted rights, usually prohibiting the agglomeration and the permanence of people in public spaces such as parks, squares, beaches, and in some decrees, churches and temples. These state and local decrees have been confirmed by the judiciary with the prohibition of caravans, meetings, and street demonstrations aiming to safeguard public health. And even with these limits, we are in front of a new situation with internet and pandemia, the fake news, spreading disinformation and misinformation about coronavirus, although not a criminal offense, has very serious repercussions, endangering public health and directly affecting people's lives. And it puts people at risk by promoting misleading information treatments. So I asked what to do when fake news spreading disinformation and misinformation damaging people's health. We have observed that the social media giants have started to restrict free speech through internal policies, expressing concern about the misinformation that can damage people's health. And the COVID law, following the constitutional parameters and the international health regulation of the World Health Organization, although deals with the protection of privacy related to the pandemic. And the standards mentioned above safeguard personal data and information based on confidentiality and anonymity. However, they allow their exposure when essential for accessing and managing a risk to public health. In front of this context of restrictions imposed to fundamental rights, we can point out that these rights are not absolute in Brazil, and the Brazilian legal system follows European and mainly in German model, where fundamental rights have restrictions, so free speech too. And well, it was my short version of the speak, my remarks, and it was a pleasure to be here again. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you, Professor Dantas.
Thank you, Luciane, for your thoughts. Very, very interesting, very deep, although short but deep. Thank you. Well, and we're coming to the end, but I have the great honor to invite for closing this series, to invite Dean Eileen Greener, our great partner in this project. If everything started with Jimmy and I a buzz and then a glass of wine, we had Eileen working hard every time to make this possible, this partnership, always welcoming our students in the best way she could. So thanks very much, Eileen, for all your efforts. And I have the privilege to give you the word now.
Thank you, Marcelo. I'm honored to have been taking part of this program and this amazing sessions, and thank everybody for their contributions. I echo you and Dean Smola in what started as something in 2017 with conversations that then led to visiting friends and attorneys and judges from Brazil, to then a legal scholars program, to LLM programs that started into SJD programs, and Marcelo, of course, are hours, and Jilson and Natami, hours and hours of coffee and spreadsheets in Greenville's brouhaha, who have now then turned into these sessions that have reached over 1,000 people, and these discussions on very, very important topics. I'm proud that we have our first graduates from Brazil this May, and that these graduates are now our Delaware Law alumni. And I just want to say congratulations to all of our students who are visiting here on our sessions this evening. Not even a pandemic can slow down our friendship. Not even a pandemic can slow down what we've built and what we're seeking to build in the future. And the work tonight has really been an echo of what we've done and what we can do for the future. And I look forward to the sessions that we are going to build upon. And I look forward to seeing our students both on campus, hopefully soon, and in the future, as well as online. And I thank you and everybody here tonight for all that you've done for both our universities and for the globe, really, and for sharing your knowledge with us. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Eileen, for your words, and thank you again for all the work you have been developing to make this partnership profitable as it has been. Well, as I said in the beginning, it's a mixture of feelings. I'm happy on one hand, but very sad that our following Wednesdays evenings won't be so pleasant as they have been for the past 2 months. Well, there it is. Wow. And wow, how nice, how nice. But I'd like really to thank everyone. All right.
So cute.
We should make one animal right during the pandemic session. Robert, would you like to say something as we close?
Sure. Let me invite Anna to say a few words.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. And I'm so thrilled to be part of this because, like, in spite of all the things happening, I'm learning every day something new. And yesterday I learned about gaslighting, when somebody can brainwash you. So meeting together with people mind-like, we share the values, it kind of helps to keep the humanity at check. What is important. And I'm from Russia, and I remember in 90s when everything kind of like fell down, and evil people, they call them barracudas, like those ugly fish. They showed up, and it's almost like, what is that educated carp who only knows how to swim in a fresh, clear waters do? So it's almost like we have to learn new skills, like, you know, you have to learn to swim with sharks and in a salty water. So Mocha is helping to ground me, and she takes me to good places, like in the park. I see families like this mom with kind of like a cool haircut playing cards with her teenagers' kids, and they're like all with chains and something like I never seen that before. Or like a couple will get a little like McDonald's or like to go meal, and they just have a picnic. And you know, you just don't see it on Tuesday night, or like, you know, as usual. So a lot of good things are happening. So it's like important to have that awareness of all the sadness. Like today in the news, like a lot of people are dying because they lost the support group, people who have addictions, for instance. So I'm all for really buckling down what is important, the family, the children, and like extended family, and finding that love and having those positive emotions. And I love the documentary about Jordan, how in a difficult time he started to play baseball just to change the gears. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Great seeing everybody.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Anna. Well, we're looking forward to coming back to Delaware soon. Every time someone asks, what's the best place to go in Wilmington? And people say, well, the Dean's house.
So I don't know if you can see this. This is our new model. It comes from California.
Oh.
Wow.
Friends, don't let friends drink bad wine.
That's great.
Okay.
Well, so thanks everyone. Thanks professors. Thanks colleagues. Thanks to our students that have been doing a great job and helping us and attending the sessions. And well, thank you very much. I'm very glad with everything that has happened here. See you very soon, I hope.
Yep.
Bye-bye then.
You. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much. See you.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.